Module 2, Fractions and Decimals. This is section 2.3, Multiplying and Dividing Fractions. To multiply fractions, you would multiply the numerators together to find the new numerator, and multiply the denominators together to find the whole new denominator. So if a over b times c over d, you would just say a times c to find your new numerator, and b times d to find the new denominator. So if I had 2 over 7 times 3 over 5, I would say 2 times the 3, which is 6, 7 times 5, which is 35. For b, it would be 1 times 1, which is 1, and then 3 times 11, which is 33. Finally, in c, you would have 8, because that's 2 times 4, over 7 times 3, which is 21. 3 times 8 is 24, and 4 times 11 is 44. If you have multiple fractions, you would just multiply all the numerators and all the denominators. 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 times a negative 14 is going to be a negative 84. In my denominator, 7 times 8 is 56, and 56 times 15 is 840. We can simplify this since 840 is 84 times 10. I would be able to divide out both of the 84s and be left with a negative 1 over 10. If we had a word problem, we would look for keywords that say of. An estimate for the measure of an adult's wrist is 1/4 of the waist size. If George has a 34-inch waist, what is the estimate of the size of his wrist? When you hear of, you multiply. So 1/4 of 34 is what we're looking for. 34 is a whole number. All whole numbers have a 1 in its denominator. Now I can multiply straight across, and I get 34 over 4. I'm going to be able to go ahead and either simplify or do the division here. 34 is 17 times 2, and 4 is 2 times 2. So I can say it's 17 over 2, or I can actually type that in to my calculator or do the long division, where I would get that 17 over 2 is the equivalent of 8 1/2. To divide fractions, we're going to need to talk about reciprocals. A reciprocal is just a flip of the other fraction. Reciprocals, when you multiply them, will always be equal to a 1. So 9 over 10 and 10 over 9 are reciprocals. If you multiply straight across, you get 90 over 90, which is equal to a 1. The product of reciprocal fractions is always equal to a 1. The reciprocal of 4/9 is 9/4. The reciprocal of 13 over 9 is 9 over 13. The reciprocal of 9 over 1 is 1 over 9. We'll use those to divide. When you're dividing fractions, you'll keep the first fraction the same, change your division symbol to multiplication, and then take the reciprocal of the second fraction. Then you'll multiply as normal. So if I had 4/5 divided by 1/8, I would keep 4/5 the same, change division to multiplication, and take the reciprocal of the second fraction. That would give me 4/5 times 8 over 1. Now I can multiply straight across, which is 32 over 5, which I can simplify to 6 2/5. Letter B would stay 14 over 17, but my division would become multiplication, and then my fraction of negative 2/5 would turn into a negative 5/2. Positive times a negative is a negative. 14 times 5 is 70, and 17 times 2 is 34. 17 times 2 is 34, and 7 times 10, I'll make the 7 negative, will give me a negative 70. Negative 7 times 10, well, 10 could be 5 times 2, and I have a 2 in my denominator. Since I can't divide out the negative 7 or the 5, I'll leave my numerator as negative 35 over 17. Try letters A, B, and C to see if you can divide these fractions and write it in simplest form. Let's see what you got. 3/5 stays the same. Division turns to multiplication. Flip the second fraction, and I'll have 21 over 20. They don't have any common factors, so I can just leave it as 21 over 20. 1/4 stays the same. Division becomes multiplication. Take the reciprocal of the second fraction. That's 4 over 4, which is a 1. For letter C, I'll have negative 1/5. Change division to multiplication, and it becomes 19 over 9. Negative 1 times 19 is negative 19. And 5 times 9 is 45. 19 is prime, and so we cannot reduce these fractions any further. You may have to multiply fractions when you have expressions. For example, they may say, if x is 7/8 and y is a negative 1/3, find out what x times y is and x divided by y. You would just take the x's out and put in 7/8, and take the y's out and put in the 1/3, negative 1/3, and then complete the operations as you normally would. Let's look at a word problem. Cedar Point, an amusement park in Ohio. Its collection of 68 rides is the largest in the world. Of the rides, 4 out of 17, 4/17 are roller coasters. It's a very popular amusement park for roller coaster fanatics. How many roller coasters are in Cedar Point? Well, you may have to read and reread this problem. We're told that 4/17, which is sort of a weird fraction, of the rides are roller coasters. Of means that we're going to need to multiply. So 4/17 of all of the rides, of which there are 68. 68 is a whole number. So I'm going to need to put an invisible 1 underneath there. 4 times 68, well, 68 times 4. 8 times 4 is 32, and you need to carry the 3. 24 is 6 times 4. Add on the other 3, and I have 272. 17 times 1 is 17. 272 divided by 17 is 16. Cedar Park has 16 roller coasters. That's a lot of roller coasters. Remember, when you hear of, that means multiply. And when you multiply, you just multiply the numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator.